speaker two before me, Miss Sylvie. My hair is tied up, my laces are done, my pocket knife is put away. May we start? Okay. I think what I'd like to start with is the issue in central Mozambique, where I am, in fact all of Mozambique, and the Miombo biome, which covers 11 countries, of massive, massive deforestation. Doesn't this work?
Yeah.
Is it working?
No, it works.
Oh, okay. You can hear me? Yeah, okay, then I don't need that. I don't need two mics. Yeah, absolutely massive deforestation. The deforestation is so severe that we today already have 4 species which are commercial species which have become commercially extinct. And those are Songololo, which is Schwarz madagascarensis, pink ivory, which is Bashimia zahiri, Mugunda, which is also known as Iroko, Chlorophyra excelsa, and Mwanga, which is Pericopsis angolensis. The taxonomists here will correct me because all of those names change periodically. I still use those old ones. And then the 5th one, which has just recently been listed in last October, no, 2 Octobers before, which is Palpreto or Delbergia melanoxylon, which is an Appendix 2 in CITES listing. I won't go through the massive list of reasons why we have this enormous deforestation, but the reasons can be governed by 3 different things. The first one is just absolute greed. The second one is pressure from agriculture in order to convert to more space for people to grow things in a not particularly sustainable way. And the third one is when you're poor, and when you think of Mozambique as poor, and we'll talk about some figures later on, and you're in absolute poverty, you really make big mistakes because you don't have time to think of anything but your own survival. Mezimbite, which is the forest center that I founded almost 25 years ago, attempts to deal with these issues. We deal with them in a particularly unique way in that, number one, we are not an NGO, we are a business. Number 2, we work on the basis of returning people to their sense of self-worth and self-respect by creating very high value activities which are dependent on forests but which do not destroy it, and in some cases now we look at the restoration of those forests. In terms of unit value, in terms of income, rather than exporting raw to China, the factor of which we've improved income per cubic meter of timber is a factor of 12. And the income in the hands of individuals within a community has increased by a factor of 14. So that's the way we actually incentivize people to participate in something that is really sensible. Then you have another problem, and that is, it is not only the timber resource which is under threat, but also the fishing resource. So when you take a walk on the beach close to where we are, you see these. Okay. Incidentally, these are made out of shunfuta mainly, which is Afzela quinzensis.
Thank you.
I don't think they've changed the name of that one yet. Now, what is really interesting in this is that not only do they represent a species which is under extreme threat, but which is largely unavailable unless you are some crooked politician with links to some equally crooked Chinese trader, usually funded by the state. What you will also find as you're walking along is there's some quite unique details in how these things are put together, repaired and maintained. If you look at some of the detail within that, you look at the little holes for pegs of how you fix your nets and do things. And then you see some guys on the beach and they're fixing and repairing these. And what you have here is what used to be a vast industry of making seagoing dugout canoes, which are incredibly durable. We dated some of these canoes back to over 100 years. Now they have the advantage that there are no bugs that live in both fresh and seawater, so the seawater treatment every day keeps them in really good shape. Yeah, but this is an extremely valuable resource, and there are a number of traditional tools and traditional skills which are used. We also have a very big problem, and that is that the quality of timber, as you stress timber, goes down. It's very hard, if you want to make something, to find a nice, good FAS graded piece of wood. The guy there is busy doing work with slightly upgraded tools. The wood there is Kaineasica, what I call umbawa, what's also called red mahogany. Okay, and what we now do is we're taking those skills and we're saying, right, there's this whole bunch of skills which went into making boats, went into fishing, a few woodworking skills which went into other utilitarian things, and if you take the products that you've got, one of those plates that you see there, and incidentally, you will also notice, seeing that you're from Connecticut, those plates were first exhibited, and they were the very first non-fine art product exhibited at the Aldrich Museum in Connecticut. So what we're doing is you're taking effectively reject timber and leftover timber, and you're working it. And that reject and leftover timber with extremely simple tools. I don't know if the guys, any of you working with a carving downstairs, you may notice all of the African guys, there was a shortage of mallets, and myself and them yesterday made mallets very, very quickly, because we're used to making our own mallets. Okay, but what the thing is you're taking those skills and you're now starting to improve them. This is an old craft, which is an Indo-Pacific Basin craft. You will find it in one form or another all the way from Papua New Guinea through southern India. You'll find it in Madagascar, you'll find it in Lamu, you'll find it in Mozambique with my guys. And we've upgraded and played with exactly the same craft. And we're assembling all of those skills into something completely unique and completely new. And what we're pressurized into doing it because we don't get decent timber anymore. So what's happening there is, if you look at this, the timber here is Musasa, that's Brachystygia spiciformis. That one is Songololo, I mentioned the botanical to you before. And there was a big mess there, okay, a beetle hole. Okay, so now it's inlaid as something which is decorative. If you look at this, we're using, again, partly traditional stuff with an adze, partly with chisels, but also you'll see introduction of angle grinders. And then you look at all sorts of other bits. A traditional detail which we saw in some product from the Philippines. Okay, if you study American furniture, you'll see it a lot with George Nakashima. If you look at Cape furniture, you will see it in Southern African Cape furniture from the 15th and 16th century. So it has a massive tradition of using that as a joint, normally to fix two planks. But what you're now doing is you're saying there's a crack. So we're stitching the crack. This is two different artworks going on at the same time. This is a plate you turned, and because the wood isn't so wonderful, you chip the edge. So you put in a new one. Another patch, and a whole range of things. A drill hole, a patch, a butterfly. All of them coming together to start creating a unique composition reminiscent of Kandinsky or Malevich. Okay? Which happens to be the fact that I went to, far too long at universities and went to far too many history of art classes. So one has that exposure and you start looking at what one can do. And these are things where you're cutting the wedges, you're locking them into each other, and then testing, gluing, and trimming them off. So all of these little things, and you start putting in, and then you didn't get it right, you put another one. So you start to develop this whole visual language and compositional skill in the person who is actually being trained to do this. And the value of it is very important. Now, all of those skills you want to now translate into something useful. So the really big pieces become that. That's the Environmental Education Center in Gorongosa, which was a community-built building. It had 5 trained artisans. and 140 indigenous locals who built it. And it took me 8 months to put that thing up, and it's probably one of the definitive green buildings in Africa at the time. You're taking something which was reminiscent of that dugout canoe, but you're carving out something. This is a big thing for an entrance of a hotel, and it gets filled up with pineapples, which are traditionally considered to be the symbol of welcome. So you look at it, if you look at the early days when pineapples were discovered in French furniture, you have always a pineapple as the head of the newel post in a bourgeois house at the, just post-revolution in France. Then we say, okay, next size piece of wood down. Those are 3 planks of mahogany, the Kayaniasica one, put together as a table and repaired. That's a big piece of panga panga and Melitio Stulmani. I don't know if the light is good enough to see all the patches and repairs in it. That's the table the right way up. Okay. The other thing we start to do is work with lesser known species. So that table is made of tanga tanga, not panga panga, which is Albizzi versicolor, not commonly used by anybody. Come in. Okay. This one is mahogany, but what's been done to it is to start giving it the coloring of what you know as mahogany, which is much deeper red. Mahogany isn't deep red. Mahogany is the pale, uninteresting, boring color. So if you actually mix a little bit of beeswax and a bit of linseed oil, you can rich it up and make it look like what you think is mahogany. Okay, this is another one, also lesser known species. That's called Makungu, which is Acacia nigrensis. That one is Mukarala, which is Bekia africana. Then we say to ourselves, okay, well, if we're making one lot of furniture, how about another lot? We don't have nice, clean planks. We don't have available for this dresser a whole lot of nice, clean, non-split panga panga. So what do? We're taking the pieces which are left over from the other guys, the non-graded timber, and we're saying, well, this is very close to the heart. So very close to the heart will split. So we stitch it. So it doesn't split. And you then add that into the aesthetic of the piece of wood. A couple of years ago, I think it was in Turkey, I spoke about the use of coconut wood and developing coconut wood. This is from the root of a coconut. And this is actually taking the roots of the coconut to turn into a massive planter. Now, what's critical in this is if you see the way the workshop is structured. Number one, it's built out of sticks and grass, which is part of another crazy program to prevent fire. Because if during the dry season, when people are burning, you are buying sticks and grass for construction, they don't burn, because you'd be burning money. Secondly, what's more important is what's happening inside the structure, and you will see people are always working in groups. And the group in this particular case, because it takes quite a while to learn how to do this, is a journeyman, a senior apprentice, and a junior apprentice. And in some cases, 3 apprentices at different levels. And that's something which is essential. That's your finished product when it goes into its use. Okay? And you always see people working together. That's your product. So what you've done, what is essentially a reject product, cleaning up a coconut plantation, taking out the roots, because if you leave them rotting, they're the home for rhino beetles, which is a coconut tree predator. You've got to pull them out. Normally they're burnt. We make something out of it. You sell it at a high value. It provides incentive. Okay, then the more finesse in the coconut stuff. When you take the root, the last piece on the bottom, to get the planter to stand up, you've got to cut the pointy bit off. So that becomes a bowl. If it splits and you can't hold it together, you cut it in an interesting way and you make a big platter. And all of them, you can see how they've been repaired and restored. And all of that becomes quite unique in its way. You'll see a log which the local Chinese traders had cut and then rejected because it had this massive curve and it wasn't any good for industrial production. So that's becoming an executive desk. And and we actually had some complete lunatic in IT from Northern California come and visit us on a desk finding safari.
Mark Zuckerberg?
Yeah, and he's, no, not quite. And that is in the process of being crafted into a desk for him as an absolutely unique piece. And he wanted real wood because he lives in such a synthetic digital environment. So he wanted something that we could deal with. Okay. Then but the big issue here is training. So there you've got some of the girls training. She's a junior apprentice. She's a senior apprentice. Unfortunately, she's a senior apprentice. Unfortunately, Mozambique is an excessively sexist place. And it has taken me over 20 years to get to the stage where we actually can train women as apprentices. Yeah. And those two girls will be the first ones who qualify. And then introduction of things where you start replacing traditional tools. So if you look at it, to work with an adze takes forever, but to work with a router and an angle grinder is pretty snappy. I also have a rule that nobody's allowed to sit on his backside at Mezimbite. If you're standing waiting for something, then you do it. Now this guy's job is he looks after the generator. So while he's waiting for the generator to break down, because it's Mozambique, it happens a lot, he helps sand the plates for the other guys. Okay, he's one of the senior craftsmen, traditional stuff, traditional work, add in power tools. Yeah, these are ladies who actually work in the mashambas. They grow rice and vegetables. It's payday, so while they're waiting to get their pay packet, they're not allowed to sit on their bum. They must help and do something. Yeah, so you have some clarity. That's a bit of a crap slide. But again, this idea of upping the tools, making it more efficient, making it work better. Some of the examples of the things that we've made. You know, that bowl is sandalwood. We spoke earlier about the toxicity of the African sandalwood. That's what it looks like. That one is songololo. African sandalwood is Spirostachys africana, for those who need it. Okay, that one is Mopani, Calophyrsperma Mopani. Very interesting timber because it's one of the few timbers that has the density and close grainness to be able to be used in woodwind instruments, as well as the stability related to moisture. Those are leadwood. And then what happens to these? In the process of what we do, and in all of this, there's all agricultural components, so this is where it goes. This is a little bit of a community outreach program. Quite a lot of the stuff which we make is not exported to the fancy museums and fancy stores in Europe and America and Japan, but quite a lot of it is used locally. So if you're an apprentice and you're making the first one, it's pretty crappy. It's also sold. And if you sell it and it goes and somebody's going to use it, you then have another little piece of income, which is yet another incentive. And most important of all, what is that incentive for? To look after the forests and restore them. So the nurseries and then the range of trees and plants. Not a lot of time to identify those, but we can go back and do it if you like. Okay, that's it.